Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of India's World with me, Frank Razan Pereira. In a huge snub to Pakistan, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj left a meeting of the SAARC foreign ministers early, which was attended by her Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi amidst a fresh chill in bilateral ties. Swaraj attended the informal meeting of the SAARC Council of Ministers held in New York on the sidelines of the 73rd UN General Assembly and chaired by Foreign Minister of Nepal Pradeep Kumar Gyawali on Thursday. After making her statement, she left the meeting early, prompting criticism from Qureshi. Swaraj and Qureshi were earlier slated to meet on the sidelines of the General Assembly session. However, India called off the meeting, citing the brutal killings of 3 policemen in Jammu and Kashmir and Islamabad releasing postage stamps glorifying slain Kashmiri militant Burhan Wani. On this edition of India's World, we will analyze the future of SAARC. Joining me on the program today are Shashank, former Foreign Secretary, Professor S.T. Muni, Foreign Affairs expert, and Pramit Pal Chowdhury, Foreign Editor of the Hindustan Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, let me bring in the program with you. Your thoughts on SAARC and its relevance?
SAARC was initiated at a time when adversarial relations between India and Pakistan were giving a bad name to South Asia region as a whole. And the interconnectivity, the economic development and everything, it seemed that within Asia, this was the slowest growth region, whereas everyone else was connecting with each other, especially in the neighborhoods. So therefore, some people got together and they came up with this idea that if there could be meeting ground in a sub-regional framework, then perhaps it will help get over and provide an opportunity for informal interactions between the leaders of India and Pakistan. Of course, it was agreed at that time that no bilateral issue would be taken up in these SAARC meetings, even in the sidelines. However, irrespective of whatever progress was made, a lot of efforts were made, especially from the Indian side. They put some money for SAARC Development Fund, Poverty Alleviation Fund, promoted all kinds of plans, let's say, for launching satellites for South Asian region to be used by others. Free trade area agreements, anti-terrorism protocol, etc. But everywhere they found that Pakistan would cooperate only haltingly. Sometimes they would agree for a few months and then later on, again they would go back. And now we have seen that on terrorism, despite signing several agreements, nothing has happened. And not only India, but other neighboring countries like Afghanistan and Bangladesh have also suffered at the hands of terrorists, sponsored by or supported by Pakistani establishment. And therefore, it is really worthwhile thinking that regional cooperation as a framework for allowing some kind of modicum of discussions and civility is one thing. But whether you can really put all your attention on SAARC, and I think that is the stage where we have reached now, where we have started talking about BIMSTEC, started talking about the Indian Ocean Rim Association, Quad, and all kinds of other things. Trilateral initiative with Iran and Afghanistan in order to provide peace to Afghanistan, which is one of the major American objectives in this region, and India is trying to do its bit for the neighboring region.
You might as well look at avenues where we get something in return, isn't it?
Well, we know that if somehow terrorism could have come down, and if Pakistan was willing to discuss in a civilized manner with the neighboring countries, and others were also saying that, okay, India is the only one, and perhaps something is wrong in the Indo-Pakistan relationship. It might have been a different thing, but everyone is suffering, and not only the neighboring countries, but even the new American president, when he came, President Trump, immediately he said, look, they are making fools of us. They've been taking money from us and working against our enemies, giving protection to these people who are attacking our friends in Afghanistan. And then, of course, President Obama, he had to give orders to catch this fellow and kill him, Osama bin Laden, from within the army headquarters area. So therefore, if they can do this to America, now China is a different ball game, because Chinese are putting a lot of pressure on Pakistan to behave as a normal country. They have not yet started doing it, but we are hopeful that as they become more and more indebted to China, they will be obliged to follow the Chinese diktats, and hopefully, at least even if they go towards communism or towards sending all their youngsters to China for education, at least they would be behaving like a more normal country.
Right. Professor Muni, does SARC need to be reprioritized, do you think?
Well, I mean, I agree with what Ambassador Shashank has said, but generally speaking, SARC was founded on a wrong premise. Let me tell you how. The idea was that if we have economic cooperation, we would be able to blunt political differences. And this proposition forgot that South Asia as a region had almost put marks upside down. It's not economics which would decide political relations, it is the political relations which would really decide economic cooperation. And that's true everywhere else. I mean, I don't want to go into theory and other aspects, but that's true everywhere else. Now, we started building that let us have economic cooperation, let us have economic cooperation, keep the political issues out, no contentious issues should be there. Even in the summit, we did not want to bring in any political issues earlier. What you call the recess of all the South Asian heads, no political issue should be there. It did not last, and then they had to bring and discuss about it. Now, the problem is that so long as you have political sharp differences in the region, it is very difficult for the SARC to proceed. That is number one. And of course, all these differences are characterized by India-Pakistan. Everybody mentions it. Ambassador is right in saying that now other countries are also having problems. But I go beyond this, that yes, this is one problem. The second problem to my mind, Frank, is that India's smaller neighbors have not been able to decide to what extent to link themselves or integrate themselves with India. And this is a major nationalism problem, this is a major internal problem. There is no national consensus in all of India's neighbors as to how close is not too close so far as India is concerned. And unless you decide on this, because India is the largest economy, is the largest country here, and unless you think of sharing something, overlapping something, to what extent you can go, you cannot build this regional cooperation. So I have a feeling that so long as India, Pakistan, other bilateral problems are concerned, is all right. Unless there is a robust political consensus in all the neighboring countries of India, and India has failed in leadership is a third issue. But unless all the neighboring countries decide, okay, we are willing to integrate our economy to this extent with India, no more. We are willing to have connectivity. Now, Pakistan was mentioned here. Now, Pakistan's problem, India-Pakistan Kashmir dispute apart. In Kathmandu, the summit almost broke because Pakistan did not want to have connectivity. It was not Kashmir problem. It is not the bilateral political region. It was the whole question to what extent we can connect with India. Now, this is where the problem is, and I think unless you are sorted out, unfortunately, it is getting more complicated because now China is being brought in to balance India, and this is where the root cause of disturbances or jeopardy in the SARC process or SARC progress is actually the political issues, and unless you sort them out, I don't see much of an economic future for this, and that's why perhaps India has started working on alternatives. We'll talk about it later.
Right, we'll talk about the alternatives in just a bit, maybe in the next round, but before that, you know, all that having been said, Pramit Pal Chowdhury, what is the future of SARC then?
Well, I think as Professor Muni has said, the geopolitics now has completely changed. India's the original thesis by which to some degree India was prepared to invest in SARC was that it would provide, because we always knew, remember Bangladesh and Sri Lanka were the countries that pushed for SARC, it wasn't India. India was in fact somewhat reluctant to set this up. But it was seen to some degree as a means to provide a political cover to Pakistan if Pakistan was actually interested in, for example, working with us in the trade and economic front. And to some degree Pakistan initially was. They did negotiate along with us and the other SARC countries with the SAPTA, the South Asia Preferential Trade Agreement. And we knew that when Indian leaders met at least their civilian counterparts in Pakistan, all the way up to Nawaz Sharif recently, they were very interested on the trade and investment front. But as we now know, it seems pretty clear the military are not, and the military have continued to dominate this. But the entry of China into the South Asian Indian Ocean region has made connectivity and economic integration in this region much more important for India. We can no longer sort of wait for Pakistan to come in at some point. India sees the rise and the arrival of China as a major economic player, means that we now have to fast forward a lot of the other processes. And this means we cannot do it through SARC, because the Pakistan veto means that SARC simply cannot be the vehicle by which you can start this. Hence the attempt now to revive BIMSTEC, which is almost SARC minus Pakistan, especially now that we've brought in at least Nepal, and various bilateral initiatives and things like the BBIN, the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India road network, and so on. I'm not saying a lot of these have been very successful so far, and as Professor Muni has said, that not all these countries are very enthusiastic about this right now. So far, Bangladesh has been the most willing, at least under the present regime, to be part of this. But even Bhutan, our closest friend in many ways in South Asia, has had some reservations, at least about the BBIN. And there's the additional problem that India is not very good in any way in infrastructure in general, including inside India. So SARC is now effectively adrift. And because the present geopolitical situation, SARC doesn't actually make any sense. So we're not going to destroy it, we're not going to break it up, but it will effectively remain in place until there is, in my view at least, a fundamental change in the India-Pakistan relationship.
All right. Ambassador, how do we sort out this problem then? Do we let it be as it is, or do we work on it? Do we try and bring about some kind of a political solution and ensure that SARC, is re-energized, if I can call it that?
No, this is a problem of inertia, because the governments, the way they function, once they set up departments to deal with SARC. So there is a department dealing with SARC, but there is no department dealing with BIMSTEC or dealing with any of the other trilateral, quadrilateral initiatives which have been mentioned. The Afghanistan issue is dealt with by some people in the Foreign Office dealing with Pakistan and Iran, or Pakistan. So therefore it is looked at in a completely different framework. So what we have to try to see is, firstly, if we want connectivity with our neighbors, we must bring it into our own planning and programming processes within the country, because you cannot just cut yourself off from the neighboring country and say, okay, we will develop here in India, turn it into a developed country, and then we will try to set up some kind of linkages with the neighboring country. Then they feel very frightened that maybe we have a similar attitude as the Africans feel about the Chinese, or now some of the countries like Sri Lanka and some others where China has taken heavy loans to them, and now they are taken over as equity some of their important assets. So this is gradually this is happening. So I must say that is second part, that it is happening. China's overreach in South Asia ultimately is likely to make these people more friendly to India. And as they were looking at China as an alternative to play the China card against India, now they will have to see how they can take care of their national aspirations by involving India in a more benign manner in their own national development processes. So I think that perhaps will be a possibility. And here I feel that even Pakistan will have to at some stage realize, because I find there are some positive aspects of the new government in Pakistan, that Imran Khan is trying to set up some kind of public funding for his hydro projects, where he is not likely to get money from the international sources immediately. And he has done that satisfactorily or very successfully for his cancer hospital. So if he is able to be successful, at least more successful than Azhar Masood or all these various other terrorist setups in Pakistan, which have become the largest charity organizations in that country. So if the government itself can set up these kind of, by public funding and public support, all kinds of initiatives, I'm quite sure the military will have to go back to the barracks And ISI will have to stop vetting all the politicians, and
Will he be allowed to do that is another big question, because, you know,
that is because Chinese are now making them so indebted to them that they have no money, and the Americans have said, look, we will not give you money
Right.
if you are going to pay it to the Chinese. Saudis have also been approached, but the Saudis have not given any promise so far. And the issue will be that Pakistan wants to be close to Iran. So Saudis don't know whether they are going to play Iranian game or Saudi game. So therefore, Pakistan, I think, will have to change its behavior, be like a normal country, but it will not be because of India, but because of its friends.
all right. So we just have to wait and watch is what you're suggesting, and things will eventually fall in place. Yes, Professor.
Well, we are waiting for 50 years that to happen, as Pramit said, that we repeatedly do it. But let me tell you a couple of things about it. Firstly, the connectivity project in SAARC was initiated much before the Chinese BRI, or they ever thought of connecting. 2007, SAARC took a unanimous opinion that we are going to spread on connectivity. It didn't work, and I think this is where, to some extent, what Pramit hinted at, that initiative and leadership of India could not push it to the extent it should have. And unless you have, we would have been 6 to 7 years ahead of the Chinese connectivity if we have really restarted working on it. That is number one. Secondly, you know, you have these new ideas as alternative coming up, like BBIN, which is sub-regional cooperation, or BIMSTEC. Well, I take these alternatives with a pinch of salt, or with my fingers crossed. I'll tell you why. The BIMSTEC was not India's initiative, like SAARC was not India's initiative. BIMSTEC was Thailand initiative. Now, BIMSTEC keeps 3 major countries of SAARC out: Maldives, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. They are out. BIMSTEC, Thailand is now half-hearted so far as this whole region is concerned. And you saw the latest example of that military exercise which was there, where Thais kept out, the Nepalese kept out. We can make a lot of diplomatic noise on BIMSTEC, but very honestly, as an academic, I keep my fingers crossed. And of course, I love to be proved wrong about it. Now, BBIN, again, Pramit has hinted, Bhutan had reservations on BBIN. With Bhutan's reservations, Bangladesh said, how can we go? So I come back to the original point, that these countries have not yet been able to decide that how closely we can integrate with India. And somewhere we must accept that.
Where does the fault lie, do you think, Professor?
We have also not, there are faults at various levels, but 2 surely, 3 I would say. One is we have not been able to invoke their confidence in us, that by joining with us, we are not going to harm them. We don't intend to harm them, but somehow we have not been able to carry that point forward to them. Secondly, within these countries, they are highly politically polarized. And one of the major factors of polarization is India. Are you for India? Are you against India? And all these countries, not only one. And third is the role of external factors. Earlier it was US, then USA wanted to push in. I have enough evidence to tell you that US in fact encouraged the SAARC. And we took 5 years. 1980, Ziaur Rahman of Bangladesh wrote that letter for the SAARC. We actually had the first summit in 85. And we concluded all the deliberations in 83 because we were quarreling up with the political issues and what happens, this and that. So in terms of external role, now US is out, Japan wants to support us, the Chinese have come in. And the Chinese have a pretty bad record so far as regional organizations are concerned. Please, anybody who is supporting China in SAARC, I would remind them what the Chinese have done to ASEAN. In Cambodia, in 2012, they did not let a consensus emerge. And even now, ASEAN is working almost under the shadow of the Chinese influence. So let us be very careful about it. Both internal politics in the neighboring countries and external role, minus or plus the lack of proper initiative and leadership on India's part, has done to SAARC what it is today.
Right. Pramit, how do we better engage then with our neighbors and in our neighborhood?
Well, I think the first step we have to do, which is what we've all mentioned, is we actually have to do something physically on the ground. You know, I once went with Manmohan Singh to Myanmar on a state visit, and you know, we signed a whole bunch of documents with the Myanmarese about about what we could do in terms of roads, highways, dams, and so on. And when I asked the Burmese officials, I said, so what do you think of the document? They said, well, it's all very nice, but you know, you have said, made these promises, the same road, same dam, same highway since the 1950s. And nothing has happened since then. You keep coming, making the same promise. And in this period, they said, you have never completed a single project. So how seriously can we take this? Well, we'll see. So you actually need to do something on the ground to be able to be taken seriously. And I think the one reason a lot of countries are now prepared to give us a second chance, or a third, or fourth, even fifth chance on this, is actually the entry of the Japanese. When you talk to the Bangladeshis and so on, they say, well, your record is a bit dicey, but the Japanese have a brilliant record. The Japanese are the kind of country that they make a commitment, they go 120% on this. They're desperately culturally bothered at the idea they don't fulfill their promises. So that's actually given us a chance. So we have to show that we can actually do this. Are we going to actually build the ports, the SEZs, the roads that we've promised? The second part of what we need to do is we need to be able to start to integrate our policies. We cannot go to Bangladesh and say, we want you to integrate economically. In the meantime, we're going to throw out 2 million people in Assam thinking that they're Bangladeshis. You can't play these different cards and expect the Bangladeshis to say, oh, okay, we don't mind the fact that you treat us as you complain about illegal migration, and yet you want us to become strategically important. On BIMSTEC, in my view, the military side of it was a complete overreach. We had barely begun to revive BIMSTEC. Get the economics going first, then you worry about the security side. Instead, we played the security side first as our primary interest, of which a lot of the countries like the Thai and said, well, that was never really what BIMSTEC was about. Why are you bringing this into the agenda?
Right. All right, let me get in closing comments now from all my guests, starting with you first, Ambassador, because China was brought up on quite a few occasions. Let's talk about China now, and if there's an attempt being made to rope China into SAARC.
No, that has already been done. It was started by Pakistan and then carried forward by Nepal. And now Chinese have even roped in with India, saying that they would like to have a joint operation in Afghanistan. The point is that Chinese have made some very positive noises towards India's cooperation with the neighboring countries like Bangladesh. Even with Nepal, they are not against this idea. In Sri Lanka also, they want that India should also get in. So I think what the Chinese are trying to do, to say that, well, look, we have reached the end of our largesse to the South Asian countries. And perhaps it is time that other countries, whether India, Japan or elsewhere, other countries, they can also get involved with this exercise. I think that possibility is one opening. Secondly, everyone says that, well, we make a lot of promises, but then we are not able to implement them. But that is a domestic flaw also. So we have to take care of how to, that the announcement should be made only, or the agreement should be made only when we are ready to put our money there and put our technical manpower there. The third thing would be that, yes, we should leave China, Japan, USA and other major players to have their own battles and to see how they push out each other. As far as we are concerned, in Africa, I think we have a good record. We have been able to prove to the African countries that we will go only on the basis of their own priorities and we will not impose our wish on them. Our private people, they will go. It's not a government initiative. The government is not going to insist on anything. So something similar should happen with the neighboring countries also, what we are doing in the faraway regions, that these countries, they set up their own priorities and we say, all right, we will then help out. You can get money from elsewhere. Initially, there was a problem that we said, look, if you're taking money from India, then you cannot take in expertise from somewhere else or money from someone else. So it had to be an exclusive Indian project.
Right.
Now we are quite willing because that has led to Chinese coming in. So now let us try to be quite open, say, look, let others come in. We are there. Only thing, our security interests should not be harmed. If our security interests are harmed, then that is a red line and we would have to take action on that.
Professor, is SAARC history as far as we are concerned?
Well, I don't think so, and I would still believe that SAARC should be future, because you have to integrate the region in one form or the other. These economies were integrated. It's a question of reconnecting them. It's not a question of connecting them. I mean, and this is where India has to show leadership. I think one of the areas of leadership is BIMSTEC. Well, I wish it succeeds, but the sub-regional cooperation. Now, BBIN was just one formulation which we started in pushing it. I think we should push India, Sri Lanka, Maldives. We should push India, Bangladesh, Myanmar. We should also push to some extent India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Pakistan is creating a problem, so we are going via Iran. But then let us work it out. Now, there again, Chabar, the kind of delays which we commit, the whole credibility is eroded. So what is needed, there are other problems, there is no doubt about it. There are reservations on the other side. But so far as India's own vision is concerned, if we have to integrate this region, let us take very solid, bold initiatives, promise what we can deliver, and deliver it to the satisfaction of the consumer, to the targeted country. If you can't do that, we will keep watching. The Chinese would deliver projects, and your credibility would be further eroded, and that would not help the SAARC at all.
Right. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, closing comment from you now. You know, till that time, we actually revive SAARC. The way forward, would you believe then is smaller groupings really, like how Professor Muni just pointed out?
Yeah, I mean, not only the smaller groupings, also say the bilateral. I mean, we have, we basically, to some degree, building up the bilateral will be a step towards making the sub-regional groupings as well comprehensive and credible. So we still need to do a lot on the bilateral side. You know, we haven't done enough. And I think it's not just the connectivity side of it. We now have to be starting to look at the soft side of economics. Can you integrate these countries financially? Can you do trade facilitation so that a container going from Calcutta to Nepal moves as fast as it does from Calcutta to Orissa or something like that. I mean, we have to start thinking in these terms rather than looking at a traditional Indian way of trade as being essentially a form of enforcing your borders. We only have, I think, still have only 2 customs posts on the land border between India and Nepal. And, you know, we had recommendations going back years to have those increased to 14. I still believe that that's still stuck. You know, these are the things we also need to be looking at.
All right. On that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of India as well. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to hear from you as well. Do share your feedback with us. Our email ID is indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it on this edition of India's World. See you again next time.